Hello, this is One Man Left. I've had a lot of people asking me about the build for 321. We have a league coming out. The build is very much intact for 321. There's a lot of people who are going to try to play it after seeing build of the week and some of my shenanigans I've been doing. But a lot of people have been asking me about a leveling guide. So this is that leveling guide. So what this video is going to be is roughly level 1 to 90, how to get the build up and running. So this isn't strictly just a leveling guide. This is more so after you beat Kitava, how do you get into shape and get to the point where you're clearing map bosses and clearing bosses and you're actually a powerful character, okay? I'm going to start you off just kind of wetting your whistle, and I'm going to show you a couple random clips of, what the build's power is before we, get you hyped. You ready?
And an Omni.
There you go. That's 2 billion DPS into an Omni drop. Alright, we're tanky too. We do damage, but we're tanky. That's an Uber Maven memory game. Alright. This we did last night, little Archmage shenanigans. This is 1.06 billion DPS.
Alright, ready, go.
Boom. That's with the damage reduction still up.
Onyx Amulet, but not the money one.
Alright, so the build's powerful, but you gotta get it up and running first. So this is gonna be an attempt to show you how to get it, not to that point, but to at least the starting point where you're in the end game, you're actually playing the build, and you can start farming your way into that. Because I have a lot of content for after that point, but not really up until that point. So let me just preface this by saying, when it comes to end game content and knowledge about the build, I will say, as not humbly as possible, I am very knowledgeable. I know what I'm talking about. If you look at something in the end game setup in the build, with the exception of maybe a few people, chances are if you think I'm doing something wrong, I am probably right, okay? When it comes to end game stuff. When it comes to leveling, I am not good at leveling, okay? I play one character per league, and I'm terrible at leveling, okay? So if you look at something I'm doing for leveling, and you say, I think what he's doing is wrong, I think I can do it better, there's a good chance you're right, okay? So when I say something relative to leveling, take it with a grain of salt, and you very well might be able to do something better than I do, okay? When it comes to the more endgame stuff, like after Kitava dies, take my word. Okay? Up until that point, ignore everything I say. I'm an idiot. After that point, let me take the wheel. Okay? So, how are you going to start leveling this build? Well, you're going to wash up on the beach. You're going to grab a scepter and you're going to kill a big guy named Hillock. Okay? That's the easy part. But then it comes down to what skills do you use? Well, you're going to be going through as a Hierophant. The Templar start is like pretty generic. Plenty of you probably leveled as a Templar. Really, any spell build is going to work, but ultimately you're going to try to get to the point where you can transition into a Mjolnir build at around level 80. So truly any build can do that. You can play Sunder if you want to, but the difference is the setup I go for tries to minimize regret orbs. So I try to play some spell, some brand, something that uses the most similar tree as possible in order to minimize the number of regrets I need to start doing Mjolnir. Because on the first day of the league, regrets cost like over 1 chaos, and chaos is scarce. So if you have to spend 70 regrets to respec, that could be like your whole opening day of farming currency. That's terrible. So I try to get to the point where you only need to respec 30 or 40 points, and you have like 15 from the quests. So it's not that terrible or pricey of a respec. So this tree is tailored around that strategy. Play spells, have elemental nodes, take a little bit of mana and life scaling, and then transition into Mjolnir at about level 80 with minimal respecs. So this is not going to be the fastest Kitava kill. This is not going to be the Tai killer 2 hour, 22 minute Act 10 Kitava. This is going to be eating your vegetables, you get by. You do it slow, but by the time you get to the point where you kill Kitava and you get to the endgame, you're a little more set up to start blossoming in the endgame. So, once again, someone out there can have a better, faster leveling tree than this. That's entirely possible. But I'm just going to show you how I do it, okay? We're going to start off. I'm going to select Templar for Path of Building here. I'm going to make a Hierophant. And I'm going to just start off right here, okay? These are the first points, like, guaranteed, okay? Pretty much whatever you do, this is guaranteed. Because these points are longer, even though the strength doesn't feel good right away. Because, like, Holy Domination and Light of Divinity with Discipline and Training is just so good. And then you get Retribution. This is, like, a pretty core Templar start. It's like I don't know if it's mandatory, but it's a pretty common first 10 points, okay? After this point, you do not get a brand until Gravicious. So I'm going to stick generic, and I'm just going to go and I'm just going to grab some life. And I'm going to get up to the elemental damage nodes, because when you're lacking damage early on and you can get to Divine Judgment, you suddenly have a lot of damage, okay? When you have no other damage scaling, you're level 20, Divine Judgment is pretty good. So, let's talk skills. There are probably 20 different skills you can level with, because you're ultimately going to be respeccing later. But I would say there are 3 skills in particular that are nice for leveling, because like I said, they won't require a whole lot of respeccing, and they kind of already use the tools that you have. Those 3 skills, in my opinion, are Armageddon Brand, Arc, and Storm Brand. Okay? So I will go through this with those 3 skills in mind, but you can do something different. So after that point, if we're going to be getting Armageddon Brand from Gravicious, that's going to be around level 30. So about this point is when I'm going to be wanting to take the brand nodes and get Runesmith or Runebinder. Then hopefully by this point, this is level 26, so maybe you don't quite get there right away. But maybe you take the AoE nodes or something first just to stall. But about that point, you're going to get Armageddon Brand or Storm Brand. You can have Arc earlier, I think. And then you're going to start cooking. After this point, there's maybe a slight lack of damage, because a lot of what I'm going into is just like mana and life. So that, like I said, this is not going to be the speed run. But then you get some elemental damage. So if you took Armageddon Brand, you can take Firewalker. The fire res isn't going to be too bad. The cast speed and fire damage is going to be nice. If you take Storm Brand... Hang on a second. Your mic volume is peaking the right ear. Alright, I'll try to talk a little less... I don't know. I'm not going to switch mic settings right now. But if you take Storm Brand or Arc, you'll take Lightning Walker. If you take Armageddon Brand, you're going to take Firewalker. Obviously, if you could do Arc, you're going to not take these, and you're probably going to go into a caster wheel and get the Lightning +1 chain. So the Lightning chain, if you can get up there, is going to be a substitute. But pretty early on, you're going to want to go into Elemental Overload, because you're not going to be getting crit. You're going to maybe get enough crit to keep Elemental Overload up, and it's just 40% more damage then. So like I said, if you're Arc, you can take the Lightning Mastery for +1 chain. Otherwise, you can just chill out here, get the brand nodes. I don't think it's worth getting the crit brand nodes, because you're just realistically not going to be able to pull off crit. We can get some cast speed for just some damage. This 2 points is nice for life and 5 all res. At this point, you can take, you'll probably, at level like 36 or something, get your first Ascendancy. So normally it's a no-brainer. Conviction of Power is like the best 2-point start possible. However, this league, they're changing Arcane Surge and Arcane Blessing. So right now, Arcane Surge gives percent spell damage, more spell damage. And then you get 50% effect from Arcane Blessing. This is not really that good. So this is typically the 8th point you take for your Ascendancy after you beat Uber Azaro. However, this league, they're changing Arcane Surge. It now gives cast speed, but no more spell damage. Instead, they're changing Arcane Blessing to not give you the 50% Arcane Surge effect. Instead, this gives 20% more spell damage, which, based off the wording, this should scale with Arcane Surge effect. This node's now giving 20% effect. These nodes are now giving 20, 20, and 50% effect. So I think it's still better to go Conviction of Power first. The 4 Endurance Charge is really nice because it's 16 all res while leveling with 16 flat fizz reduction and some crit for LA Overload. But I'm changing things up this league, and I believe Arcane Blessing is the best second Ascendancy node because it's going to give you not only 20% more damage, but it's going to give you guaranteed Arcane Surge to get that buff. Around that point, you'll then come up and take these nodes for 90 Arcane Surge effect, which should make the 20% more spell damage into 38% more spell damage, okay? 38% more spell damage is pretty good 2 Ascendancy points. So, that point, you're around Cruel Lab is when you're going to start to go into the mana. You can start to pick up a little bit more. Some of these points are actually okay damage because, like, you know, this gives you 40% increased damage. You can then get a little more mana points. Like I said, we're getting mana at this point, but it's not necessarily translating to a lot of damage. You can do Archmage for brands, and it's okay. Even with the low amount of gear, you can still Archmage. But ultimately, this is getting into the point where we're starting to kind of tread water, and the build's maybe not looking as strong as, like, you know, a Tai Killer approved leveling build. But we're doing it to get to a point where you're just going to try to kill Kitava and make the transition. Once again, these 2 points as well. If you're Armageddon brand, Divine Fury is really good. So that's 2 more points where you can get some damage. So now, you're, like I said, you're kind of just in filler point mode. You can pick up a couple of the masteries for some damage. This used to have a really good mastery with 15 all res, but in 321, the 15 all res is going away. However, there's a new node that's being added that is 25% chance to invert elemental resistance on enemies. That is a very powerful mastery. That is one of the best masteries in the game, in my opinion, that's being added in 321. You will absolutely take that early on. As soon as you can get that node that inverts enemy resistance, take it. It's strong. Alright. Now you can start to maybe grab some aura nodes, because at this point you're not going to do the full unreserved aura yet. You're going to still have your mana starting to be reserved. But here it says we're level 64. So we're getting to the point here where we're running out of points to put in. And we're about to the part where we kill Kitava, okay? If you kill Kitava, maybe we'll get a 50 life node too, just get some filler points. You kill Kitava, what I typically do then, this is where we're getting out of the, like, leveling part of the game, and we're getting into more what I consider my expertise, and that is the transition into the endgame. So imagine this. You're level, even if you're level, like, 68, whatever, you kill Kitava. Probably the first thing you're going to do is maybe buy a better weapon, but everyone's going to be trying to buy a better weapon. One of the first things I do is I buy a bunch of 2 stat jewels, or 3 stat jewels, okay? So you could buy a jewel that looks like this, alright? It's, you go to the trade site, you go to something with just mana, some attributes, and, like, some resistances. This jewel right here is better than 2 talent points, and it's probably 1 to 3 chaos, okay? I'm going to start buying these like hotcakes. At that point, I start taking all these 2-point jewel sockets I passed up on. There's a 2-point jewel socket, there's a 2-point jewel socket, there's a 2-point jewel socket, and I'm going to fill them up with these 3 stat jewels that I buy off the trade site after getting into maps, okay? Now we're filling out the tree a little nicer up until level 67. I think it gets up to 71. 69. What am I missing here? Oh, I never took Mind Over Matter. Take Mind Over Matter. That's a good idea, probably. So at this point, still Armageddon brand, okay? You can even take this 1 point. This is a decent floater point. At this point, You're level 71. You're in white maps. You're just getting some chaos, and you're buying, like, decent jewels and decent rings and decent amulet and decent belt, trying to get as much mana, strength, and int as possible, okay? At this point in the game, Mjolnirs should be popping up for, like, 20 to 30 chaos. Maybe they're going to be more expensive this league if more people are playing this build. But you're probably going to be farming white maps for a couple hours to get a Mjolnir. Getting a Mjolnir does not necessarily get you able to transition yet, because if you try to transition right away after putting on a Mjolnir, you're going to have like 55% accuracy, and it's going to be miserable. I would say the 2 items you need to transition is Mjolnir and Shaper's Touch. Now, here's one of the only advantages I have to being the world's slowest leveler. If I was Tai Killer and I killed Kitava in like 2.5 hours, and I got to the point where I had a Mjolnir after like 4 hours, here's the thing. Shaper's Touch is like the most common drop-off Shaper, but it's still a drop-off Shaper. So you need to get to the point where the Tai Killers of the world are killing Shaper, okay? However, if you're a strategic slow leveler like Mr. One Mana Left, you won't be getting to that point until like the 10-hour mark, at which case people will be killing Shaper, and people will be posting Shaper's Touches. So, typically, when I get Shaper's Touch and Mjolnir, that's when I transition. So let's look at my POB profile from, this is day 2, but the way the snapshots work is this means this is the end of day 1. This is not the 48-hour mark into the league, this is the 24-hour mark into the league. So I have a Mjolnir, okay? I have Shaper's Touch. I've bought good jewelry, like, remember what we said we like? Mana, strength, int, resist, life for ivory tower, mana regen, ES. That's a good ring, okay? I'm going to snipe that ring before any of you guys see it, because I'm going to have search strings going that get that ring. And I'm going to get rings that look like this. Look at that ring. That's a busted-ass ring. I bought this the first day of the league for like 15 chaos. Because remember, everyone else is saving up 15 chaos and they're buying weapons. But when you realize that in this build, the power comes from jewelry, while everyone else is buying weapons, I'm pumping all my currency into jewelry. And I'm sniping rings like this before anyone else, okay? The belt's okay, but like the 2 rings are really good. So you'll notice I don't have an Indigon yet. Here's the biggest problem with leveling the build, okay? If you league start this and you don't reroll, you just straight up start Indigon or start Manabond Mjolnir like I do, the biggest hurdle on league start is the Indigon. Like Shaper's Touch, but even more extreme, Indigon is the most common drop off Uber Elder. That's a good thing. The problem is it is still a drop off of Uber Elder, meaning you have to sit there and wait for people to kill Uber Elder, start posting Indigons, have the first couple posted Indigons get sniped by people who just went like crazy group find to start buying them before I can afford them. And they're going to start going for like 4 or 5 divines, the first several. Probably around the second day, though, the price will have fallen to more like 1.5 divines. So remember, the day 3 profile is actually the 48-hour mark. So this is the 48-hour mark of last league. Now we're looking pretty good, okay? I've got a 5-link ivory tower with a really good roll, because it's a really cheap and easy to buy unique, so you might as well go for a good roll. I've got a 24% Indigon I bought with really good rolls. I've got a Prism Guardian and Stampede, and I'm now able to go low life. So at this point, I've gone low life. I have 10k ES and 10k mana with 19k evasion. I have the aura set up because I take the 20% mastery here. And then I have Zealotry, Discipline, Grace with Clarity, Blood Magic. And then somewhere I have a Wrath, Eternal Blessing. The reason you go Stampede, if you don't already know, is the fact that it lets you Cyclone at 150 move speed. When you don't have an overabundance of move speed, it's very nice for early mapping, okay? So how does the tree transition into this? Well, we had this tree, remember. you're gonna try. I'll post these POBs in the description, but this is level 85 for you now have an Indigo or a Mjolnir, but you don't have an Indigon. The reason there's a difference there is when you don't have an Indigon, things like generic elemental damage are still okay. That still represents a decent amount of damage. And you don't necessarily go all in on mana yet. But eventually you're going to transition into the low-life Ivory Tower tree, where you no longer need this because Indigon is covering all your percent damage. You're a little more all in on mana. You've got a healthy mind. So now your mana is going to start to really climb. I know this says 4k mana, but I have 0 gear equipped. So this is like your 10k mana tree. With this tree right here, this is level 91, I believe. That is approximately what you're going to want to use with the setup that's got my day 3 profile from this league. I'll post the link to my PoE Ninja from this league as well. It's going to be pretty similar. You can use the time machine feature here to see what my gear was on day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And just kind of see the progression path. So, as far as tips for the early gearing, okay, you have the mandatory uniques that are kind of core to making the build work. But if you really want to make the build powerful, don't go cheap on jewelry. Your rings should be good. Your jewels should be good. Remember when I said that I was going to buy 3-stat jewels for like 3 chaos? Let's look at all my jewels. I'm wearing a ton of rare jewels. Look at them, okay? Mana, life, all res. Fantastic. Mana, life, 2 res. Fantastic. Mana, 2 res, all attributes, and 7% Mjolnir attack speed. This is a 4-stat jewel. This is amazing. Kind of a 3.5 stat jewel. Also, once again, like a 3.5 stat jewel. 3.2 stat jewel. Healthy mind. That's a 4-stat jewel. That's a 4-stat jewel. After this point at level 91, the next progression is starting to add your first large cluster jewel, where you pick up like Scintillating Idea and maybe you get a Storm Drinker. But that's starting to transition into the more like Endgame setup. But if you looked at the tree here, I have the power of snipping tool. I talked about this earlier. One of the strengths of the tree is, even though this is trying to be like a generic leveling tree for just some caster build, if you compare that to, say, the level 85 tree where I'm actually Mjolnir, they're not that different. This is achievable into this with probably only about 30 respecs, maybe less. And you get like 16 respec points, or maybe 20 if you do all the side quests, just from leveling through the campaign. So when you're on day 1 and regrets cost 1.5 chaos, yeah, you can level Asunder, but do you want to try to come up with 70 regrets? Or do you want to be able to get by with 20 regrets that you can almost SSF? That's why I take this tree. It's not the best leveling tree, but it's a pretty seamless transition into this. That's why. You'll be taking points at like level 65 where you're like, why am I putting into mana nodes? I feel like I'm not getting much stronger by taking these. At that moment in time, you really aren't. But it's going to get you to a point where you have a smooth transition the second you can put on a Mjolnir and Shaper's Touch and start mana bonding. From this point, you're level 90-ish, and you should be about on par with my day 3 profile. This is starting to get into the actual endgame stuff in the build, which I would say I've got a little more content on in my other videos. But maybe if I briefly speedrun what you do, after this point, the next thing you're going to try to go for is probably an attributes belt. It's a big upgrade. In my day 4, I don't have it yet. I'm just getting more jewels. I got my large. I'm trying to get my flask set up correctly. But eventually I'm going to go for a better belt because it represents a huge gain in stats. I still don't have it yet. By the way, on Stampede, you can go Revelry or Primal Spirit. No, you go Primal Spirit on neck and Revelry on boots. Still a 5-link. Let's see if I get an actual decent rare belt. I still don't have a decent rare belt. Okay. I've gained a 1 mod Clarity Eye. This one mod can be purchasable usually for like 1 to 2 divines, and it represents like 1500 ES gain. You'll see here I've already shot up to 14k ES. That's partially from this mod. But I've put in, the reason I've got the large over here is to do split personalities. You can go int mana, you can go strength mana. Eventually you're going to go strength int. Those are going to be the most expensive though. Int mana is going to be a little cheaper probably on league start. Do I ever get the the attributes belt? I must just be really off on when I get this attributes belt. I thought I did that early on, but apparently I don't. Yeah, week 2 I've got the attributes belt. That's a really good attributes belt to be fair. And I've got rare boots. I have a video where I talk about rare boots already. Attributes belt, there's 2 ways to get it. You can buy the base and then throw essence on it until you hit the attributes plus percent attributes on suffixes. And then use the beast thing to lock suffixes and then do a veiled chaos orb to get the prefixes. The whole thing's going to cost you 3 to 5 divines to craft, so this is probably like a day 5 or later craft. This is probably not going to be like a day 2 craft, but like in like the day 5 to 7 range, getting a rare belt this way is nice. I actually got this belt by buying a belt that had everything else, and then I hunter slammed the attributes. It's like 1 in 12 to do it that way, but that's a way to do it. But after this point, we're getting more into the endgame setup. Like my week 3 profile is just crazy. I've already got this ring, Calandra's Touch, an Eyes of the Great Wolf, a Squire, like we're getting into, I've got crit jewels. We're getting really, really out there by this point. So this is beyond what I want to talk about in this video. But a lot of people have been asking me about help getting the build going. So this is my take on a leveling guide. But like I said, I'm not the world's greatest expert on leveling. I'm maybe a little more of an expert when it comes from when Kitava dies to how do you get to like the level 90 profile. Hopefully this goes over some of that. And hopefully you have a more seamless leveling process in 321 than I do, because as usual, I am going to struggle and just eat my vegetables and get through it. But I'll see you guys next time.